Well, now it is my distinct pleasure to introduce you to Dr. Shawn Talbott, who I met about 12 years ago, shortly after my doctor told me there was nothing more he could do to help me. Well, fortunately, I heard Shawn give a talk, and he spoke a very different language from my doctor. He spoke a language of how my body worked and subsequently turned my life around. So I hitched my wagon to his star all that time ago. Shawn is a psychonutritionist who integrates nutrition, biochemistry, and psychology. I'll say that one more time. He integrates nutrition, biochemistry, and psychology to help people feel, look, and perform better. Shawn was one of the early pioneers of the gut brain axis movement, educating us about our second brain. He has been an extraordinary product developer for decades who not only walks the talk, but he runs, cycles, swims, climbs as well. He's competed in the Ironman competition for years and achieved Fittest CEO of the Year several times, competes in triathlons, and runs several wellness centers around the world and speaks publicly addressing root cause issues linked to our state of unwellness. As a scientist with a PhD in nutritional biochemistry from Rutgers and an entrepreneur with a degree in EMP and entrepreneurship from MIT, his name may be familiar to you if you have read his first book, followed by these two, which were page turners for me because it's like, this is my life playing out. His 14th book, How He Has Time to Write, I don't know, but this is a must read. Vicky's had it. We were delighted when we realized we both had the same book. And Shawn we'll have a few links at the end of his talk, and then we'll have some Q&A. So over to you, Shawn.
All right, thank you, Patricia, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you to you and Vicky for inviting me. Maybe when you come back on the camera, we can talk about what your T-shirt says. But it says "Happy is the new sexy." I wore this T-shirt today because of what we're talking about: healthy gut, healthy mind. Because I'm going to talk about the link between the microbiome and the gut and how glyphosate can mess that up, and how the gut really is the second brain that determines in large part how we feel here in our first brain. So much so that we say often in the kind of work that I do, that how you feel is not just in your head, it's also in your gut, because your gut is your second brain. It's the source of all your neurotransmitters. And I want to try to unpack that for everybody. So let me get my slides up, and let me see. We're right here, and we're going to share this. And oh, geez, that didn't come out the way I wanted it to. There we go. It's over here now. All right, so let me do this. All right, beautiful. So you should be able to see that now, hopefully. Let me do one thing real quick. I want to make sure that I'm doing this the right way. I'm going to stop this. I want to make sure that I'm sharing my correct screen for everybody. Okay, I'm gonna redo this now. Bear with me real quick. That one. Okay, beautiful. So now we should be in good shape. So as Patricia said in the introduction, my PhD is in nutritional biochemistry, but the kind of work that I do and have done for the last 20 or so years sometimes is called nutritional psychology these days, right? It's this idea of the link between what we eat and how that affects our gut, but then how our gut affects our brain and our mental wellness and our overall mood state. And, when I started doing it 20 or so years ago, it really was something that didn't make sense to a lot of people. How in the world can my gut influence what's happening in my brain? And nowadays, if we sort of find ourselves in the right place at the right time, if you will, where so many people are talking about mental wellness, so many people are talking about stress levels and depression levels and anxiety levels and all those sorts of things, and finally realizing that the science around the microbiome is really changing to the point where we can not only understand the science, right, and it's interesting because of that, but we can actually go in and we can manipulate and modulate the microbiome to improve how we feel on a variety of different levels. So let me start off. Patricia was very kind to show several of my books. There's lots of other really good authors, and I recommend their books too. So this is what I'm going to be talking about for about the next 20 minutes. This mind-gut connection, the gut-immune connection, both of these books by a good friend of mine, Emran Meyer at UCLA. This book, The Psychobiotic Revolution, I'll talk a little bit about probiotics and prebiotics and things like that we can recommend to help to kind of repair the gut or nourish the gut to get better signals coming out of the gut so that we feel better. These are sometimes called psychobiotics now because they are biotics. They're bacteria or fiber structures that can change the gut, but they have a psychological effect, right? That's that idea of psychonutrition that we're really trying to pioneer. Here are a couple of other books. Brain Changer. This is all about the Mediterranean diet and other ways of eating to change mood. This is Your Brain on Food. Uma Naidu at Harvard has written a really nice book here. Here's my mental fitness book that just came out a couple of years ago. It's this idea that your mental wellness can be traced back biochemically right down to the level of your microbiome, right to the level of the bacteria in your gut. And I won't spend too much time on this, but just to say that the majority of our neurotransmitters are made in our gut. And glyphosate can interfere with the production of those neurotransmitters. I'll talk a little bit about that biochemistry in just a second. But when we talk about those neurotransmitters, we're talking about serotonin. 90% of your serotonin, which is sort of the neurotransmitter of happiness, is made in your gut. And so if your gut is not right and you're not making enough serotonin, you're very likely to be not as happy as you want to be. You might be sad. You might be depressed. Similarly, 70% of our dopamine, the neurotransmitter of motivation, is made in the gut. About 50% of our GABA. GABA is the body's primary relaxing neurotransmitter. So if we can't make enough GABA, we're going to be tense and irritable and anxious. If we can't make enough GABA, we probably have trouble falling asleep at night. There's all kinds of sleep problems out there in the world, but falling asleep, being able to wind down enough and calm and relax your brain, that is a GABA thing. It's not related to melatonin, but you can see melatonin is here. About 80% of our melatonin is made in the gut. So we can go through all of these different signaling molecules. And the sort of moral of this story, if you will, is that your microbiome and your gut in general is sort of like an internal, on-demand, dynamic, natural pharmacy. So meaning if it's in balance, it will produce what you need, when you need it, in the right amounts in terms of your neurotransmitters for your mood, your cytokines, which are inflammatory signals, a lot of your immune system actually resides in the gut. We usually say around 70 to 80% of your immune system is in the gut. And so you guys are sort of probably seeing where I'm going with this. If your gut is out of balance, there will be a lot of imbalances across your entire body. You'll have mental imbalances, you'll have immune system imbalances, you'll have inflammatory imbalances, and that might be that because glyphosate interferes with what is happening at the level of your microbiome, and thus you get this domino effect of interfering with metabolism throughout the entire rest of the body. Okay, so that's the sort of premise. I do a lot of research. I write a lot of books. I'm talking to you right now from this facility. This is our mental wellness center in Plymouth, Massachusetts, just south of Boston. We do a certification program at Marietta College, where I got my sports medicine degree, where we train people to be certified mental wellness coaches. And what we try to do is be as holistic as possible. We train people about the microbiome. We train people about the gut-brain axis. We educate about how to eat and how to expose yourself to nature and how to move your body and how to get good sleep quality, right? So it's not just one thing that we can do. It's a multitude of things that we can do, which I think gives us a little bit of hope when we hear some of the dismal statistics, when you start hearing about how, our soil is being damaged, like John was talking about, and how our environment is being damaged, like you heard Stephanie talk about, right? That can be kind of gloomy to understand, but there is a lot that we can do to kind of fight back against some of this stuff. So one of the programs that I've been writing about since my very, very first book, The Cortisol Connection, is what you see on the screen right here, the SENSE program, SENSE. And I do talk a lot about supplements, talk about different probiotic strains and different prebiotic fibers and different phytonutrients, etc., because I view those for a lot of people as almost being like the easy button, right? Where, everybody knows they're supposed to exercise. Everyone knows they're supposed to eat right. Everyone knows they're supposed to get 8 hours of sleep, et cetera, et cetera. And yet there's this gap between what we know sort of intellectually and what we do behaviorally, that supplements sometimes can help us close that gap. For example, if we can help somebody with their motivation, maybe they'll exercise more. If we can help them with their appetite signals, which a lot of those come from the gut, we can help them choose a better diet. If we can help them relax, GABA, for example, like I talked about a minute ago, we can help them get better sleep quality. So I always like to put supplements in the proper context, because I think in the supplement world, there's a lot of like magic bullet thinking where you can just take the pill or mix up a magical powder and drink it down and it's going to solve all your problems. But it really needs to be thought of in the proper context. But when we feed things to the gut, we are directly applying them to the microbiome. And I put this graphic up just to show that there's a lot going on here. The gut and the brain talk to each other on a millisecond by millisecond basis. Sometimes the brain and the gut are talking to each other through the nervous system, things like the vagus nerve. Sometimes they're talking to each other through neurotransmitters, like I just talked about a few minutes ago. Sometimes these signals are being sent through your immune system. Sometimes they're being sent through your inflammatory cascade, these compounds called cytokines. But there's a lot of signaling that goes back and forth between these two brains, so to speak. You're going to be scared by this by the graphic that I'm going to show you in a second, which illustrates the whole signaling across the gut-brain axis. But it really can be as complex, which you'll see on the next slide, or as simple as you want it to be. This is the simple idea that what happens in the gut, whatever you feed to the gut, whether this is good food or bad food, or a supplement or not a supplement, or glyphosate or not glyphosate, that's going to change the signals that come out of the gut and go across the axis to the brain. And the axis is, I'm not going to talk too much about the axis, but suffice to say that it is the communication network whereby those two brains talk to each other. So a lot of times when we're trying to modulate someone's mental wellness, there are things we can do in the brain. It's not like the brain isn't an important tissue anymore. It's still very, very important organ. There's things we can do directly in the brain to help people improve how they feel. There's things we can do in the gut, the second brain, to improve how people feel. There's even things we can do in the axis alone, separate from the two brains. We can prime the immune system. We can lower, inflammatory load. We can improve blood flow, right? Those are all signaling pathways that if we improve them, if we improve the efficiency of that signaling, we can improve how somebody feels overall. So again, this gives us a lot of touch points, if you will, to help somebody feel better. This is the complicated version of it. Anytime we eat, let me orient everybody to this. I use this in all of my lectures to students to show them how much signaling happens across the gut-brain axis. So here's the brain at the top. This is the blood-brain barrier. This is all the signaling that happens across the axis. So neurotransmitters and hormones and peptides and cytokines and bioactive signals, including including the immune system cells. This is the gut lining, which is actually very structurally similar. The gut lining is very structurally similar to the blood-brain barrier. And if one is leaky, if you have leaky gut, for example, you almost definitely have leaky brain. And then at the bottom here, you see the microbiome, and you see these influential factors. The food that we eat on the good side, the green side of the cartoon, or the bad side, the red side. And so every time we eat, we have the opportunity to send good signals from the gut to the brain, or not good signals, adverse signals. And the result, the end result of all of that is that we can either be building our brains and improving them, or we can be breaking them down and leading to neuroinflammation and neurodegeneration. So that's sort of like the lead up into actually talking about glyphosate. I wanted to sort of like level set everybody so we know how much signaling is actually coming from the microbiome and the gut-brain axis, because of things like this. This is a paper that I always use in my classes when I'm trying to educate students about how glyphosate has wide-ranging mental and physical derangements across the entire gut-brain axis. So this paper came out about 2 years ago, maybe. Let's see, 2023, maybe the middle part of 2020. Oh, here we go, right here. Yeah, September 2023. And I think it does a really good job of giving a very good overview in a somewhat technical but not overly technical way that I can give to general science students. And what you see in this paper, here's just a section of the background, which gives us a lot of background on glyphosate. We can unpack this and really very simply say a few things about glyphosate for the purposes of our discussion right now. It's an herbicide, but it has antimicrobial activity, right? So it's an antibiotic. It's widespread in the environment. You just heard Dr. Seneff talk about it's been shown to be present in our waterways and in our orange juice. There's reports that show that it shows up in cereal like Cheerios and things like that. It's sprayed on the lawns at the park. And in people's front yards and things like that. So we are exposed to it all over the place. The WHO has labeled it as a probable carcinogen, and we know that it's detrimental to the microbiome, which I'm going to mostly focus on now. So I speak at a lot of natural products conferences, right, where there'll be a lot of people who are really into regenerative agriculture, really into organic foods, really into natural this and natural that. And I will sometimes try to stir up the audience just to get everybody a little riled up at the beginning. And I'll come up as a scientist and I'll say, you know what? All this hype about glyphosate being dangerous, I don't get it. And I'm doing this for effect, okay? So nobody get scared right now. I do it for effect because the pathway, and this was in Dr. Seneff's presentation, the biochemical pathway that glyphosate works on to 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 kill weeds is not present in humans. It's only present in plants and bacteria, and it's not present in humans. And so I'll say to the crowd, I go, if this pathway isn't even present in humans, how in the world can glyphosate be bad for us? And I'm doing it for effect. Back in the late 60s and the early 70s, when glyphosate was coming onto the market, we really knew next to nothing about the microbiome. And of course, if this pathway is present in bacteria, it is present in humans because bacteria are present in humans. Our microbiome is a collection of trillions, maybe as many as 100 trillion bacteria that do a lot more than just produce neurotransmitters. They regulate our aging process, they regulate our level of inflammation, they regulate our immune system, they really regulate everything, right? It's hard these days to study the microbiome without looking at it and going, wow, this microbiome controls absolutely every aspect of human metabolism. And so if you damage that pathway so that the microbiome here cannot produce these aromatic amino acids, if you're a plant, that's bad because now you're not going to be able to do normal metabolism and the plant can't produce its proteins and therefore it dies, right? So that's why the weeds die. But if this happens in your microbiome, you can't produce the things that these are building blocks for. So phenylalanine is a building block for norepinephrine. Tryptophan is a building block for serotonin and melatonin. Tyrosine is a building block for dopamine. So follow me here for just a second. We've been seeing over the last 10, 20 years, we've been seeing an explosion around the world in mental wellness problems. More depression, more anxiety, more burnout, more PTSD, more ADHD, more autism, which all you can trace all the way back on neurotransmitter metabolism pathways, all the way back to the microbiome. And this, I think, is the problem. I think that we're seeing damage of glyphosate at the level of the microbiome. So the microbiome is less efficient or very inefficient in producing these aromatic amino acids, and therefore we can't produce those neurotransmitters. And that's leading us to have these mental wellness problems. So this was figure 1 in that paper that I just mentioned. This is figure 2 in that paper. And what I did on the next 2 slides is I've cut this graphic in half and blown it up so that you can see it a little better. I was afraid that this might be too small to show to everybody. And so this graphic, the top part of it is here. Here's glyphosate, changing what happens in the crops, changing what's happening in the microbiome. And that's leading to problems not just at the level of the bacteria, the actual microbiome, but it's also leading to changes in intestinal integrity, what we would call leaky gut, which has a whole host of other problems. If you have leaky gut, you very often have autoimmune system problems. So, there's also an explosion in autoimmune system problems. There's an explosion in food allergies, food intolerances, people being, intolerant to gluten or intolerant to dairy or things like that. And that's not necessarily the bacteria, the microbiome, it's actually the integrity of the tissue of the gut itself. So you're changing the bacteria, you're changing the tissue of the gut, and you're changing the metabolic profile of the whole system. You're basically damaging this internal on-demand pharmacy. So now it's still internal, but it's not very effective at producing what you need when you need it, and that leads to a whole host of problems, which you can see on the bottom of this graph. And it's everything from these mental wellness problems, hormone disruptions, cardiovascular problems, digestive system problems, reproductive problems, and then overall immune system and sort of like longevity, anti-aging kinds of problems. So it's very widespread. One of the things in the kind of work that I do, and I'm going to show you one of the studies that we've done, the kind of work that I do, people will sometimes look at the benefits that we get with a microbiome intervention, and they'll say, how in the world could one intervention, repairing the microbiome, how could it generate so many benefits? Physical benefits like athletic performance, lower inflammation, lower oxidation, better mood state, superior immune system protection, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it all comes back to this idea of if your microbiome is out of balance, you're going to have problems in all of these areas that you see on the screen right now. If your microbiome gets put back into balance, you're going to see benefits in all of these areas, right? So I don't want it to make it sound like, the microbiome is the new silver bullet. And that if you just fix your microbiome, everything's going to be glorious. But this is really where the new research is, that if we can get the right microbiome, and here, going back specifically to the glyphosate question, look at what these aromatic amino acids do. They do a heck of a lot throughout the entire body, not just the neurotransmitter piece, but they're cofactors for vitamins, they're neuroprotectants, et cetera, right? So it's doing a heck of a lot. So here's one of the studies that we did. We used an extract from a fruit called palm fruit. This was work that we did with some colleagues at MIT. This is a water-soluble extract from the palm fruit that yields these very unique polyphenols. And if you think back a few minutes ago when I talked about the shikimate pathway and when Dr. Seneff talked about the shikimate pathway, this is the pathway that glyphosate interferes with to reduce the production of those aromatic amino acids, which are the building blocks for your neurotransmitters. By delivering these nutritionally, right, we have people supplement with them, you're doing sort of an end run around that part of the pathway. So even if it's blocked, even if that pathway is inhibited, you have these building blocks for your body and your microbiome specifically to use these as building blocks to make more dopamine so you're motivated, make more serotonin so you're happier. You guys get the idea. So what we did in this trial was we supplemented people with it. Several trials. Some of the trials looked at heart health. Some of the trials looked at brain health. Some of the trials looked at healthy aging, where we were measuring oxidation and inflammation. We saw benefits in all of those. When we look specifically at gut health, we're seeing that this palm fruit extract changes what's happening at the level of the gut, and it does things like this: increases the production of short-chain fatty acids, which is important for immune system and inflammatory balance, increases levels of a particular kind of bacteria called Akkermansia, which is having more of that is related to having better gut integrity and better metabolism, and elevated levels of this other specialized bacteria, Faecalibacterium prusnitzii, which is typically low in a lot of the metabolic problems that you see: Crohn's disease, obesity, asthma, things like that. So supplementing with something like these shikimic acid derivatives that we see in palm fruit is a way that we can rebuild that damage that is caused by something like glyphosate. We've also shown similar studies for nutrients like astaxanthin. Astaxanthin is a carotenoid that comes from algae. So this is the reason that salmon is pink, because the salmon eats the algae and that astaxanthin gets into their flesh. And we've known for a long time it's an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, but here we've been able to show that it helps the signaling across the gut-brain axis and helps to improve physical performance and also mental performance. So we also did a study that we presented at the American College of Sports Medicine meeting a couple of years ago, where we looked at supplementing palm fruit and astaxanthin to improve physical and mental health. And so I'm just gonna go right to the results portion of this. We're able to show that it improves what happens at the microbiome, but then because of that, it improves cardiovascular efficiency. So now your heart is working better, that we can measure by something called heart rate variability. So if your gut is working better and your heart is working better, your brain is also working better. And that's what we measured with this profile of mood states. We were able to show significant reductions in all of these negative mood states. So depression is cut by 76%. Fatigue is cut by 51%. Mental confusion is cut by 62%. The flip side of that is that your focus is better by 62%. So a lot of benefits because of what we're able to do at the level of the microbiome. So I'm going to skip over this one. I'm going to skip over that one. So the end result of this is that there are things that we can do to fight back against the damage that we're seeing with these chemicals contaminating our food, contaminating the environment, being exposed to. Ideally, we would want to remove that contamination, right? We would want to lower our exposure to that damaging compound. But when we can't, and I think we need to be a little bit practical here, when we can't, there are things that we can do to get ourselves in a better place physically and mentally if we think about sort of root cause. Glyphosate is causing a problem here. That's leading to a problem there. Are there ways that we can circumvent those problematic aspects of metabolism? Another way that we can do it is by changing what we're eating. So in the US right now, and this really goes for US, Europe, Asia, any industrialized country, are really eating kind of an American pattern of diet, right? A Western diet, where we're eating too many processed foods. So if our processed foods are 60% or 70% of our overall caloric intake, if you can just eat less of that and shift your eating pattern away from processed foods towards more whole foods, whether that means you're growing your own foods, you're raising your own foods, you're buying foods you're cognizant of where your food comes from and how it's being grown and choosing organic and things like that, that can go a long way. Probably the dietary pattern that has the most data for how it supports the microbiome and therefore how it supports heart health and immune system health and metabolic health and mental health is the Mediterranean diet. And it's an eating pattern that looks like this. I've taken in my most recent book that Patricia held up, this one right here, Mental Fitness, I have a mental wellness diet where I've taken the best aspects of the Mediterranean diet and the Okinawan diet and the Scandinavian diet and the et cetera, and said, what are the commonalities of all these diets in these blue zones around the world that are helping people live longer and have more health span and live longer, healthier. And I've put that together in a plan that looks like this. But one way that I'll leave you with this, something that we can all do, is this 30 plant challenge. This is one of the best ways, and I challenge all of my students to do this. Try to do this. Eat 30 different plants within a 7-day period. And so you can choose from vegetables and fruits and seeds and nuts and spices. Why 30? We know that 30 is kind of the sweet spot from the microbiome project. We know that eating 30 is better than 25, and eating 25 is better than 20, but eating 35 isn't that much better than 30. So 30 will improve your microbiome diversity, and that's why it's the target. So if you eat 30 different plants, vegetables, fruits, seeds, nuts, spices in a 7-day period, you will increase your microbiome diversity. And among microbiome researchers like me, there's only one thing we all really agree on, right? Because it's such a new area of research. We agree on diversity is a good thing. More diversity is better, and eating more plant foods is the way to do that. So if you can choose that, you're going to do a lot to repair your microbiome that has maybe been damaged by some of the things that we've talked about today. So last one, I'll leave you with this. If you want to learn more about, any of this, any of the diets, any of the books, any of the lifestyle interventions, even any of the supplements, you can contact me at any of these social media channels. And then Patricia's link right here will give you information about any of the supplements, the specific probiotic strains and the specific fibers and the specific palm fruit extracts and things like that that you might want to add into your daily regimen. So with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Vicky and Patricia and see if we have some questions. Thanks a lot, you guys.